This is the Milo Beasley Show. This is the Milo Beasley Show. There's only one thing you need to know. This is the Milo Beasley Show. And now, here's your host, Milo Beasley.
And welcome to the Milo Beasley Show, episode number 371. I'm so excited for our guest today. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and welcome him. Please help me welcome. You've seen him on my first introduction was The Heights. You've seen him in The Watchman. You've seen him on Flash. And most recently, you've seen him on The Last of Us. Please help me welcome Jerry Wasserman. How are you doing, man?
I'm good, Milo. How you doing?
I'm doing great, especially now chatting with you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'm pleased to be on your show. I love your theme music.
I'm excited too to be talking with another college professor. Now you obviously have a little bit more experience at it, and you're teaching cool things like English and theater, and I'm teaching about video games. So
Yeah, takes all kinds. And besides, what's cooler than video games?
Well, I teach at Full Sail University in Orlando, which you may be familiar with being in the entertainment industry. But basically teach on the gaming, the business side of the gaming industry. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. Been doing this for a little while now, and it's in video games. I mean, you were very recently on The Last of Us, right? And were you aware of the game prior to either auditioning, getting the role?
I wasn't aware of it prior to auditioning. I'd never played the game. I'm not a gamer. As soon as I got the part, I did my research and I found out that it was a very big game and that a lot of people thought it was the best game that had ever been created.
Right.
And there was also a lot of press hype about the show. That it was going to be, the next Game of Thrones, $10 million budget per episode, and then I saw Chernobyl, which was Craig Mazin's show, which was fantastic. And I was lucky enough to have him actually direct my episode, so that was an extra bonus. So by the time I got to set, I was pretty well acquainted with what a big deal it was for a lot of people.
Right. And the show did not disappoint. It was definitely not a letdown for those fans, and it brought new eyes onto it, the game, onto the genre.
Yeah. I had a kind of similar experience with Watchmen because that was sort of a cult graphic novel, which I had never heard of. But once I started doing my research, I found out that it was huge among aficionados of the genre. So, I've been lucky to be on a lot of shows that have attracted that kind of cultish attention. X-Files, Battlestar Galactica,
Have since again, with The Last of Us being what it is and so big, have you found that people that you knew that in everyday settings, whether it be at university, whether it be friends and family, have come out of the woodwork to talk to you about this?
Absolutely. I've gotten emails from people I haven't seen in years. They haven't necessarily wanted to see in years, but no, yeah. It's one of those shows that everybody watched. It was, you don't get that many like water cooler shows anymore the way there used to be. Like everybody would watch Friends and talk about the last night's episode. Right. And with like the rise of streaming, that's in a way that's kind of disappeared. Although there are certain shows that kind of like Succession that sort of rise to the top for, momentarily. And certainly The Last of Us was one of those. So yeah, I've gotten a lot of strokes. Even my kids have been excited about seeing me on that. They're pretty blasé by now about seeing Dad on TV. Another Hallmark movie. But this was something special. And it was really good. I mean, I watched the whole series and thought it was terrific. And my wife, who was my toughest critic, also thought it was really terrific. So Yeah, altogether, it was just a phenomenal experience.
Now you said you watched it. I always love it's pretty much a 50-50 split, I think, on those who watch their own work. Do you tend to watch your own work, or do you feel like you may criticize yourself too much?
No, I love watching my own work. It's one of the only reasons, it's one of the great pleasures that I get from it. I mean, yes, it's total narcissism. And I don't often like what I've done, particularly. But when I do, and I did on The Last of Us, it's a great pleasure. It's because when you're doing the work, when you were especially acting for the camera, you don't know what you're going to look like. You don't know what the editing's going to be like, what the lighting's going to make you look like, how much of you is actually going to appear in the scene. By the time it hits by the time it's actually broadcast, and so I'm always curious. I'm always a little anxious about how crappy it could potentially be. So yeah, I do. I always do watch. And sometimes I watch again and again if I really like it.
Now you said you're not a gamer, but are there any games that you have played or that you're aware of that you might like to see get that on-screen adaptation?
You're asking the wrong guy.
uh, Along those same lines, obviously you're into theater. I'm super into theater down here in Orlando. Now, obviously, I don't partake or anything like that, but along those same lines of moving things from one platform to the next, right now the popular thing to do is take popular movies that may have been popular in the 80s or 90s, Back
Yeah.
to the Future, Beetlejuice, Mean Girls, and transfer them, adapt them to the stage. Are
Yeah.
there any movies of your favorites, like a Ghostbusters or something like that, that you would like to see?
Yeah. I'd like to see Taxi Driver as a stage play. I mean, not necessarily I mean, it would be interesting to see how, say, the street scenes were actually done. But the two shows that I'd like to see on the stage are Taxi Driver and The Wire, because I think they're both sort of epitomize the kind of great intense acting, which for me is always better live than it is on screen. And I'd like to see how those stories could be translated to the small stage without losing without losing too much of the kind of thing that you get when it's opened out to car chases and gunfights and kind of stuff you can do on TV or on film. But I think of De Niro's performance in Taxi Driver. I think of half a dozen of the performances in The Wire,
Right.
and I would love to see those live and close up, and how those actors bring that kind of intensity to life in front of a live audience. I think that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I think now that you say, like, Taxi Driver would be amazing.
Yeah.
Gosh, now I need to see that. Now I need to see that. Now, your time on stage and stuff, and what has been your favorite production that you've worked on? Do you have a favorite? Is that like saying, do you have a favorite child?
Yeah, I have a few favorites. Um, in some ways, my sort of breakthrough stage production was a production of Wojciech. Do you know the play Wojciech? It was a 19th century German play about a soldier who kind of goes crazy and kills his wife. It's very intense, very intense. Kind of an expressionist drama that's been done. I saw a couple of productions when I was in graduate school. It's often done in really innovative ways. But I guess like the shows I've just been talking about, like Taxi Driver,
Right.
Wire.
Yeah.
I got to play the main character, which I rarely ever do. I'm basically a supporting character actor type. Got to play the main character, and and he was this character who basically, hears voices and sees visions, and they cause him to murder his wife, and then he kind of awakens from that, and is just horrified at what he's done, and that kind of that gamut of emotions is what I personally live for as an actor. I would much rather do drama than comedy. I do quite a bit of comedy, but it's really digging down into the dark places of the soul that do it for me.
Right, that you can bring that out on stage, and the thing about stage is, you get one shot at it, and I think that's the amazing thing about stage. There's no cut. Let's do it again. Let's try it this way. It's
scary.
scary. Scary is the definitely the key word. Now, you've also have written. You're a published author of. Could you see do you see yourself doing any more works, any more books in the future?
Yeah, I basically spent COVID writing a book on African American post-war music that I'm trying to get published right now, called "Life Could Be a Dream," and it's about blues, rhythm and blues, and gospel between 1946 and 1956, right after World War II, right before rock and roll.
Right.
And it's this kind of lost decade of phenomenal music that hardly anyone knows anything about. I mean, I shouldn't say that. Hardly anyone who's not Black and old knows anything about. A lot of it has just been really kind of lost to history. And the music is, so much of the music is so phenomenal that I found a lot of it I found it on YouTube, and I found it on iTunes. And I realized I was listening to these songs over and over again on my playlist, and I just wanted to share them with my friends, and that led to wanting to share them more widely. And so I ended up with this 350-page book, or manuscript anyway. So yeah, that's my passion right now, is really music.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it goes, with theater. I think music is a way to express that emotion, and I think it's the best way to express emotion. But so I'm wrapping my head around this because I'm fully intrigued. So, were you just listening to, again, like you said, on your playlist, and then you're like, oh well, I like this person, let me look more into their music, and then, man, I really like this, which led you into like almost like a rabbit hole? Or and so what?
Yeah, well, to some extent. I mean, I had done some work on music before. I was teaching a class on African American literature and the blues, so I was a big blues fan, and I gave a couple of talks at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on blues music, and so I had a starting point. So I kind of knew about the blues, and I knew about kind of when the blues came north after World War II and went to Chicago, and Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf and those guys in that era. And then kind of trying to track down some of the more obscure stuff on iTunes led me to the rhythm and blues of that period, with horns and singers who didn't necessarily play instruments, and saxophones instead of guitars, and harmonicas, and that led me to gospel, which was just the ultimate revelation, like Black gospel from the golden age, from like 1945 to 1960. It's just mind blowing for a white kid who just never heard that stuff before. And so yeah, by the time I was done, I had this great database of phenomenal music, and I would talk to my friends, some of whom were musicians, and very few of them knew this music and these songs. And I thought, okay, there's my project.
That's amazing. Music definitely does it for me. And then, speaking of music, as I said, my introduction to you. One of my favorite TV shows of all times was from the mid 90s, 94, 95 ish, was The Heights. And first off, the title song to that is one of the greatest title songs of all time, in my opinion. But what do you have any recollection of working on The Heights during that
Oh, I
time?
do. I'm so glad you asked me about that, because not very many people know about that show or remember it. It did last a few seasons. I ended up doing 4 episodes. My character was called Jimmy Jim's Bandisi. He was a low-level Italian gangster. I played a lot of Italian gangsters back then, 80s and 90s. And my favorite scene of all time that I've ever done is from that show, where I grab Dizzy and I introduce myself to him, and I use that on my audition reel for very many years. So I have two good stories to tell about that. So one is I auditioned for the first time, and the director asked me if I could sing. And there's sort of a gospel rule in acting that if you get asked by a director or a producer if you can do something, you say yes, right? Can you ride a horse? Of course, of course. Can you skydive? Absolutely, right? Can you sing? Shit, of course I can sing. Anybody can sing. I said no. I was too scared to say. I thought, what if they cast me as a singer? I said no. I ended up singing on the show, of course, once I got cast, because Jimmy Jim's daughter is getting married, and he hires the band to play at his daughter's wedding. But there's only one, there's one proviso, which is that they have to let him sing. And so I got to sing a couple of verses of The Wanderer, right? The Wanderer by Dion, right? Here come the Wanderer, yeah, the Wanderer. And I sang it terribly. I sang it terribly, and my character sang it terribly.
Right.
My character sang it terribly unintentionally. I sang it terribly because I was a terrible singer. So yeah, I love that show though. Those kids were extremely talented, and it was a shame that it didn't last longer. I felt that way about a few of the shows that I've done, where I've actually gotten continuing roles, and I thought the show, not just because I wanted more work, but because I thought the show actually deserved a better fate. Yeah.
The Heights, I think, I mean, that was around the time that where I was becoming a teenager, so I got to watch more television than that I got to choose than the previous years. So that was one of the first shows that really pulled me in. And like I said, the opening song, "How Do You Talk to an Angel?" I think one of the greatest intro songs of all time.
Your opening theme is pretty damn good too.
Oh, thank you.
Is that you singing?
It is. Oh, that is definitely not. No, I put out a call onto Facebook to all my friends, and I just happen to have some talented friends. And yeah, it's I got super lucky. He hit it on the first try, and he was like, "I don't know if you like this," and I was like, "Like? I don't think I like it. There's not a word that can make me love it."
That's pretty rocking.
Do you have any? Are there any shows, any favorite shows of yours that have that intro, that catchy intro that you almost like an earworm that once you hear it, it maybe brings you back, or you hear like the opening of was it like Full House? Whatever happened to things like that. Are there intros that really get you?
Yeah, The Wire. The Wire had this deep. It was called Down in the. What was it called? Down in the bottom. Down. It was a deep blues, and they actually changed it from the first season to the second. They had a different version of it by a different artist. I can't remember who sang it. It's called Down in the something, Down in the Bottom, or something like that. And it was fantastic. It's and also I can't think of the other one, but yeah, that's the one that really comes to mind. Obviously, I love that show, but yeah, I thought everything. It's one of those shows where kind of everything came together: the acting, the writing, the music, the settings. Baltimore, whoa, whoa.
Right, absolutely. I mean, that's one of those cities. It just has so much to it, and it's right around and what it doesn't have, it's everything is around. Now,
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier, and you've mentioned earlier, some of the shows, like in movies like The Watchman, The Flash. You've done, you've done a bunch of the quote unquote nerd, comic type shows. Smallville, Riverdale, which was the Archie comics, and as you said, Battlestar Galactica. Do you have any fandoms? Like, are you into comics? Are you into Star Wars, Star Trek? What's your fandom?
Yeah, I guess I guess I'm not. I guess I'm not. I mean, when I was a kid, I collected baseball cards. Does that count?
Yeah, I think so. I still collect baseball cards.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, I don't really have any fandoms in that regard. I'm more of a music nerd than I am like a TV nerd. But you mentioned the Flash, so that again, interesting. That was an interesting experience because I suddenly find myself cast as the president of the United States, and I thought, okay, this is going to be it's going to be a big time role. So I had about, I don't know, 30 seconds on screen, and before I was evaporated by aliens, and it was a crossover episode, and so all these Marvel heroes were there, including Supergirl, and none of them could save me. So that was a short but sweet one.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how do you? So yeah. Did you base your talking or anything on any former presidents?
No, no. I think it was intentionally anonymous, an anonymous president, a sort of generic president. So, no, I didn't try and do my Kennedy accent or my, Jimmy Carter or whatever. Yeah, but again, like Battlestar that was a really great show, I thought, and that was a really good episode that I was in. Again, in my ideal world, I would have gotten more episodes. It was a one-off, but I was very proud of that. I was proud of the work that I did, and I thought, it was a really good show. I was excited about that one. Watchmen, I enjoyed it, but I didn't think it sort of lived up to what it could have been. I thought that the novel was way better, and that the adaptation kind of lacked some kind of killer instinct. It was a good movie, but I wished it had been a great movie. iRobot I thought was better. That was a better experience with another iconic, kind of a story, and that was interesting among other things because I got to work with Will Smith, which was a thrill. Unfortunately, for me anyway, he was kind of kept at a distance by the producers. He had this kind of posse that traveled with him, even on set, and there were very strict rules about how close you were allowed to get to him. No photographs. You couldn't even ask for, like, could we do a selfie together or anything like that. And it wasn't him. He was very businesslike. He was very professional, nice guy, but it was no touchy. Will. So that was a little bit disappointing because part of the thrill for me of acting is getting up close and semi-personal with the people that I work with, and 99 times out of 100 they're very gracious and very willing to take a photo with you, or share a beer with you, or have a conversation with you. And when you're not allowed to do that, it's kind of disappointing.
I can see that, and yeah, I can definitely see that. And along the same lines of working with people, you did quite a few episodes of 21 Jump Street with Johnny Depp before he was Johnny Depp.
Before he was, yeah.
Could you?
That was really interesting because I mean, in a way, it was before he was Johnny Depp, but he was already kind of a young star, right? And he was surrounded by toadies. He was surrounded by enablers. And he was in Vancouver for like 7 years, right? Or 6 years, however long that show went. And he could have very well been a brat. He was a kid. He was in this, it wasn't LA, it wasn't New York, backwater, let's say. He had done it so many years, and it wasn't a deep show, right? He was kind of sleepwalking through the part towards the end, and he could have been tearing up his hotel rooms and having parties and snorting coke. And he was so professional. He was such a nice guy. He was always on time. He always knew his lines. He was never an asshole. He was it was kind of disappointing to see what happened to him when he did become Johnny Depp, in a way, because I found him, in retrospect, it was almost miraculous that he wasn't a jerk, given the opportunities and the sort of encouragement that he had at the time. He was making zillions of dollars, and he could have done anything. And he was extremely professional. Not everybody in that demographic who came up to Vancouver to act was. Let me just say.
That's kind of interesting to hear. Did you realize at that time when seeing him that he was going to be a megastar? Could you get that feeling?
Well, he was pretty charismatic, I mean, he was very good looking, and and he was talented. You couldn't see in 21 Jump Street the kind of talent that would emerge later on in his movies. But, he had this kind of twinkle in his eye, and he had a really good sense of humor. And you could see that he was just kind of slightly off kilter in a good way, right? That he was going to do slightly eccentric kinds of things. But no, I don't know that anybody could have seen how amazing he became at his prime. Yeah.
One of my favorite things to do, and they pretty much start around August, is, and if you ask my wife, she pretty much does it all year, and that is to watch Christmas movies. And you've done quite a few, in ranging, from Hallmark to Black Christmas. Are you a Christmas movie person?
Well, I think most Vancouver actors are Christmas movie persons, because once Hallmark decided that Vancouver was going to be their home base,
right,
and they make like 30 or 40 Christmas movies a year here alone, that's where the work is, and so you become a Christmas movie guy. And I have to say, okay, it's a Hallmark, I mean, in a way, like Hallmark has become sort of a joke, but everybody watches Hallmark movies, right? Everybody loves Hallmark. Sometimes I know very sophisticated people who, when they're making dinner, they turn on the Hallmark movie, and it's just like the background. You know exactly what's going to happen in every movie because the formula is exactly the same.
right.
But for older actors, it's a gift because there's always a father and a mother of the boy and the girl who are, the leads. And often those characters have their own subplots and their own romances. And, Hollywood is pretty notorious for sort of erasing, well, women especially, over a certain age, and men too, for that matter. And, the Hallmark movies give guys like me a chance to act at an age when a lot of those, the kinds of parts that I've always played, the lawyers, the doctors, then especially the cops, aren't available anymore. There might be a retired cop every now and again, but the Hallmark movies are, they are what they are,
Right.
and they shoot them pretty quick, and you always know what you're getting, and there are certain rules or certain protocols about Hallmark movies, things you're not allowed to say and you're not allowed to do. But I also have to say that Hallmark's come a long way in 5 or 6 years. So when they first came up to Vancouver, I don't know, maybe 2015, 16, something like that, maybe 17, there was a lot of criticism about Hallmark because all the characters were white, all the characters were heterosexual. It was a very kind of socially conservative genre. And for whatever reason, they listened to those criticisms and they changed radically. There are all kinds of interracial relationships now in Hallmark movies. There are all kinds of gay characters. Sometimes the gay characters are lead characters. Gay relations are the kind of lead story. I mean, that was unheard of less than a decade ago. So, and I'm sure they've expanded their audience too because of that. They may have lost a small part of their traditional audience, but I'm sure they gained a larger part of the new audience because of that. So, kudos to them for, for whatever reason, kind of opening up what they were doing to the 21st century.
Right. And it's as you said, they're super successful at it. My friends at That's For Entertainment have 2 conventions a year called Christmas Con, where a lot of those actors are going to these conventions and meeting tons of fans that are there because of the Hallmark Christmas movies. So
Right.
it's
I think there are a lot of Hallmarkers. Sorry, there are a lot of. I would say there are a lot of Hallmarkers who are as passionate and fanatical about the Hallmark Christmas movies as there are gamers and Battlestar Galactica
Right.
types and etc. So yeah, it's it's part of the spectrum. And one of the great things about TV and film is that there's this gigantic spectrum, everything from kids shows to porn and everything in between. And the more voices and the more let a million flowers bloom or whatever it is Mao Zedong said back then.
Do you have a favorite Christmas movie?
Again, I'm. It's not a genre that I necessarily watched a lot of in my time. National Lampoon Christmas probably would be my kind of number one. I liked all their movies.
That one's definitely a top fiver for me. Absolutely,
Yeah.
Absolutely a top 5.
And The Grinch That Stole Christmas. That's probably because it was a book that I read our kids, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. All right. Something I want to do now is something I do with all my guests here. It is called the Milo Beasley Show Frequently Asked Questions. I'm going to ask you 5 questions. They're the same 5 questions that I asked to all my guests.
Okay.
No wrong answers. So question number 1. What was the first concert you ever attended? And I'm excited for this one because you are a music person, as you said. So what is the first concert you ever attended?
The first concert I ever attended was a rock and roll show. It was Murray the K's Christmas show in 1962 at the Brooklyn Paramount Theater.
Speaking of
And
Christmas,
the headliner was Jackie Wilson, who was amazing. And it had the Four Seasons and the Shirelles and a couple of other girl groups I can't remember, and what's her name? Dionne Warwick, who was way down at the bottom of the bill. She hadn't kind of busted out yet as a sort of mainstream popular singer. But yeah, Jackie Wilson, I'll never forget that. He would take off his jacket and fall to his knees, and the women would scream. Pre-Beatles, right? The women would scream and throw their panties at him and stuff like that. It was incredible. And I was like probably 17. And that was pretty much heaven from 17-year-old in the growing up in the 50s. Yeah,
That's a great first concert.
it was.
That's a man. That's a great first concert. All right, question number 2. Do you believe in ghosts?
No,
No?
no,
Never had anything weird?
no.
No.
I'm pretty much an atheist when it comes to the spirit world. Yeah.
I understand. Question number 3. It's a twist on a common question, but in a movie about your life, who would play your parents?
Well, my dad would be Michael Douglas for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. He looked quite a bit alike, and the sort of vocal similarity too. My mother might be Sarah Michelle Gellar.
Okay.
Or Bette Midler.
All right.
Yeah, kind of a sturdy, pretty, strong, kind of Jewish woman. Can kill vampires.
That's the best type. All right. Question number 4. Who was your first celebrity crush?
Oh, that one's easy. Annette Funicello on the Mickey Mouse Club. And I'm sure a lot of guys of my generation had their crush on Annette Funicello.
That's a great answer. I've yet to have anybody answer that. Well, no, you know what? I think you might be the second.
Yeah.
At least the second to mention. But yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, the Mickey Mouse Club was still pretty new, and I don't know how old she would have been, maybe 13 or 14, but yeah, she was gorgeous, and everybody I knew, all the boys I knew, had their crush on Annette for sure.
Yeah, that's a good one. And then question number 5, and I'm very interested in your answer. This is my favorite question to ask because you said that part of the fun of doing your line of work is meeting people. So what has been your biggest fanboy moment? One where you met somebody and either you couldn't speak, you were just, or you spoke way too much. You put your foot in your mouth, and you're like, "Oh, maybe you shouldn't have said that."
I've had quite a few of the latter experiences, but I think my number one, without exception, would be meeting Sidney Poitier and working with Sidney Poitier in what was undoubtedly the worst movie he ever made, called Shoot to Kill. It was 1988, shot in Vancouver. We were cops together, and I once, when I was in graduate school in Chicago, I was at a conference in downtown Chicago, and there was a crowd of people in the lobby, and Muhammad Ali walked into the lobby, and there was this kind of magical moment where suddenly, like, there was this guy who just attracted magnetic, he had so much charisma. He just embodied that charisma that you could not. He was also like a foot taller than everyone, probably the only black man in the room. And, he floated like a butterfly. But Poitier was like Muhammad Ali, meeting him. He had so much dignity and so much charisma. He was so good looking, and he had done such fantastic work as an actor. Historical work, work that changed the world, and I was awestruck. I was absolutely awestruck. And I have one of my favorite photos of all time is a selfie with Sidney Poitier.
Oh man, that's incredible. That's incredible. My parents used to watch In the Heat of the Night all the time, and then in fact when we would go on vacation to Georgia, and where they filmed the TV show In the Heat of the Night, and but all the signage and the police cars and everything all said Sparta, Mississippi.
Yeah.
Which was my first introduction to Hollywood, if you will. That hey, things aren't filmed where you think that they're filmed. So that was definitely my first. I was like, oh, okay, but I will never forget that.
Yeah.
Going to Sparta, Mississippi, which was actually Atlanta, Georgia.
Well, now it would be Vancouver, British Columbia. So there you go.
Yeah, everything is. There's so much being filmed up there. I have friends all the time that that are like, oh yeah, well, I had to go to Vancouver to film this or this, that. Like I have a friend who is in Smallville, so he spends months at a time up in. He also goes to school up there as well, so has to do his schooling there, but
So The Last of Us is going to be shot in Vancouver for next season.
Oh,
yeah, it's moving from Calgary to Vancouver.
Oh, interesting. What is it about Vancouver? Since there are so many things, what is it about Vancouver where that is the new Hollywood?
Well, there are a few things. One, the Canadian dollar, which is 75 cents US. Two, it's the same time zone as Hollywood. So if they fly to Georgia or North Carolina to shoot, they're 3 hours out of whack. So they can go home on weekends, right? Whoever they are, the producers and stars. And three, we've built up this enormous infrastructure since it's been going on since the mid 80s. And, the studios are here, the special effects here. There's a large now, there wasn't before, but now there's a large core of quite experienced actors who've learned to suppress their Canadian accents in American shows. And technicians and grips and everything else that you need to make movies. So, if you can make the movie for 75 cents on the dollar and you can go home on weekends, why fly to Prague or, someplace else where they used to go because there was, it was cheaper.
Right.
But yeah, so I think those are the main, and also the locations. There are a lot of locations. There are really good sort of gritty urban locations in the city. There's there are mountains. There's ocean.
Right.
There's
farmland.
There's snow. There's all kinds of stuff, and especially for certain kinds of shows, like X-Files really established Vancouver as a place to shoot dark shows because it rains here so much, and the days are so short in the winter that the light seems to be just perfect for that kind of atmospheric show.
Oh, yeah, I never thought.
And The Last of Us, the second season is going to be set mostly in Seattle, so that's the reason. That's the main reason, probably, that they're going to shoot here.
Okay.
It's surprising that there's not more TV and film work in Seattle, but because Vancouver is so similar and because it's cheaper.
Yeah, I've been to Seattle and Vancouver. Well, I've been to Seattle a couple times, but I was able to spend a couple nights in Vancouver, and it was so cool. It was such a cool little area, and I mean, when I say little, I mean it's huge, but it was very new to me, so I definitely can see the appeal.
Yeah.
So that is about our time for today. Do you have any other upcoming projects that you are at liberty to talk about? Anything you'd like to say to our folks watching at home?
I don't, unfortunately, have any upcoming projects other than trying to get my book published. Right. So if you know any publishers who are looking for a hot property, history of music, an area that's been totally underexplored, under historicized, give me a call.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally don't know anybody, but hopefully this can get out there either on the YouTubes or the podcast, and people can be like, "Oh, of course I know a person," because
Absolutely.
everybody always seems to know a person, right? Like that's how things can happen, happen, right?
Connections.
Connections. Again, I'd like to thank you for taking the time out tonight to chat with me about your career, your experiences. And I thank you so much. It means a lot.
Well, thank you. It's been a gas.
And thank you to everybody who is watching or listening. Don't forget, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. But most importantly, tell your friends. And we will see you next week.